When we talk about signs that reveal when someone has shared themselves with another, the first thing that surfaces is not physical evidence. It's not lipstick on a collar or a scent you don't recognize. It's subtler, quieter, and far more telling. It's the way a person's emotional energy begins to shift, the way her presence no longer carries the same consistency it once did. Before the body betrays us, the heart already has. You see, human connection thrives on attunement, the invisible thread that runs between two people when they are in sync. When someone has just shared intimacy elsewhere, that attunement falters. It doesn't snap all at once, but it loosens, creating a gap. Suddenly, you find that conversations don't carry the same depth, silences feel heavier, and her attention feels like it's split between being here and somewhere else. It's not always about coldness. Sometimes it shows up as a strange lightness, even relief, because what was previously longed for or suppressed has been momentarily satisfied outside the relationship. Think about it this way: every encounter with another person reshapes us, even if only slightly. When intimacy is involved, that reshaping is profound. A woman who has just slept with someone else may not intend to reveal it, but her energy carries a different resonance. She may smile the same way, but the smile doesn't land with the same warmth. She may listen to your words, but her gaze has that faint, distracted quality, as though part of her is still replaying another scene, another moment, another emotional world that does not include you. Emotional displacement doesn't always present as withdrawal. It can also emerge in the form of overstimulation. She may come back into your presence unusually animated, almost glowing, not because of you, but because she has been infused with the novelty of another encounter. That aliveness, however, is not anchored in the shared history of your relationship. It feels imported, like a perfume carried in from another room. The irony is that in both cases, withdrawal or heightened energy, the thread that binds you feels thinner, less stable, because it is no longer exclusively nourished within the space you share. Psychologically, this happens because intimacy is not just a physical act. It's an exchange of attention, of validation, of desire. When she invests those deeply human currencies in another man, what she brings back to you is altered. It's like pouring water from one container into another. You cannot do so without changing the level in each. Suddenly, you sense that the reservoir you once drew from together doesn't feel as full. You ask a question, and instead of the effortless elaboration that used to follow, you get shorter, more perfunctory responses. You notice that the subtle reassurances, those little touches, those unconscious gestures of care, arrive less frequently. What's important here is to realize that emotional displacement is not always intentional. It's rarely a conscious decision to withhold. Instead, it is the natural consequence of divided emotional labor. When a woman has recently engaged with another, she is processing the weight of that experience, whether it brings her guilt, excitement, confusion, or relief. That internal processing inevitably draws energy away from the present relationship, leaving you with a version of her that is not fully available. Philosophically, this points us to a deeper truth about fidelity. Fidelity is not simply about the body, it is about where one's attention rests, where one's emotional loyalty is directed. Betrayal, when its most painful form, is not when the body strays, it's when the presence shifts. You can feel someone lying next to you and know that they are not entirely there. Their silence carries another story. Their absence sits in the room like a third presence. And here's where it becomes even more complicated, because human beings are masters at self-deception. She may try to overcompensate. She may lean in, ask you more questions, try to mask her inner conflict by flooding the space with activity or affection. But even then, the texture is different. Overcompensation has a performative quality. It doesn't feel organic. It feels rehearsed, like a play staged to reassure you, or perhaps herself, that nothing has changed. But you know it has. We always know, because the body might play along, the words might play along, but the essence, the energy, cannot pretend. Let's not forget that displacement also carries an element of contrast. When a woman has been with another man, the comparison is inevitable, even if unspoken. It could manifest as disinterest in certain shared rituals that once held meaning, or as irritation at small habits of yours that previously went unnoticed. This is because fresh intimacy creates a recalibration. The bar shifts, the lens adjusts, And suddenly what was once neutral can feel irritating. What was once satisfying can feel insufficient. The relationship absorbs this contrast, often in ways that neither partner can fully articulate. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice how this shows up not just in moments of conflict, but in the quiet spaces when you sit together, when you share a meal, when the day ends. The absence of ease is palpable. The pauses stretch longer. Her laughter feels delayed. Her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. These are not grand betrayals of the body, but micro-betrayals of the spirit. They are fragments of presence that have been displaced elsewhere, leaving you with the residue rather than the fullness. Now, does this mean that every instance of withdrawal or distraction is proof of infidelity? Of course not. Human beings are complex, and attention shifts for countless reasons: stress, personal struggles, fatigue. But when the displacement aligns with other subtle signs, when the pattern becomes consistent, it becomes difficult to ignore the possibility. Because at its core, intimacy demands presence. And once that presence begins to fracture, the body often follows where the heart has already wandered. The most devastating part is not the physical act of betrayal. It is realizing that the connection you once relied upon, the invisible thread that tethered you together, no longer carries the same strength. It is the recognition that her heart, her energy, her emotional labor has already begun to live somewhere beyond your reach. And so, the first sign is not in her body, it is in her presence. It is in the way she withdraws, or in the way she returns too lit, too charged, with a spark that feels foreign. It is in the way she looks at you or avoids looking at you. It is in the subtle absence of the everyday gestures that once said without words, "I am here, with you fully." When that presence begins to falter, it is the earliest and perhaps the most undeniable sign that something has shifted. Because the truth is, before a woman gives herself away physically, she gives herself away emotionally, and when she returns, she cannot fully bring that part back. Presence is the truest currency of love. When it is no longer fully yours, nothing else can compensate for its loss. If the first sign lies in the space of presence and emotional displacement, the second reveals itself in the body. Because while words can be managed and feelings can be concealed, the body always tells the truth. The body is the unconscious narrator of our stories. It betrays what the mind works so hard to hide. And when a woman has just slept with someone else, her body language, her posture, her rhythm of movement, her physical availability carries an unmistakable difference. These changes are rarely loud. They don't announce themselves in obvious ways. Instead, they emerge as micro shifts, small deviations from her normal pattern, the kind of details you only notice when you're attuned. For instance, maybe she leans away slightly where she used to lean in. Maybe her hugs are shorter, her touch feels less spontaneous. Or perhaps it is the opposite. She suddenly becomes overly affectionate, more tactile, more demonstrative than usual, as though trying to reassert a sense of closeness. But when you pay attention, you notice that the timing feels off, the warmth feels manufactured, and the gestures don't flow with the same unconscious ease. Think about what intimacy does to the body. It alters posture, it shifts energy, it creates either a glow of satisfaction or a restlessness of guilt. A woman who has just shared herself physically with someone else carries that imprint. Her body remembers. And when she steps back into your shared space, that memory creates dissonance. The embrace doesn't land the same way. The kiss feels slightly delayed, like her mind needs to remind her body to play along. Even her breathing patterns, the pace of her speech, the way she holds her gaze, these carry subtle signs of a body negotiating between two worlds. What makes this particularly powerful is that body language is primal. It bypasses rationality. It doesn't wait for permission. The nervous system is always telling the story. A shift in her tone of voice, a hesitation before touching your hand, a sudden stiffness in the shoulders. These are not conscious strategies. They are involuntary echoes of an inner conflict. The body struggles to reconcile loyalty to one person with the residue of intimacy with another. That struggle is not spoken, but it is enacted. Consider how desire itself manifests physically. When we are drawn to someone, our body softens around them. Our gestures open, our face brightens, our eyes hold longer. That same principle applies in reverse. When desire has been given elsewhere, the body carries either a subtle resistance or a displacement of that softness. It is as if her body says, "Without words, I am not fully here." The warmth that once belonged to this space has been redirected. And then there is the matter of rhythm. Every couple develops a rhythm of touch, a choreography that feels natural only to them. You know how she reaches for you, how she kisses, the pace at which intimacy unfolds between you. When that rhythm changes suddenly, when the choreography feels disrupted, it is not random. The body does not simply invent a new rhythm overnight. A disruption often indicates that another rhythm has been introduced, another choreography has been practiced. And so the body you thought you knew moves differently, not dramatically, but noticeably enough that you feel, even if you can't articulate, that something is off. There is also the presence of overcompensation. A woman who feels the weight of her secret may lean into affection more than usual. She might initiate touch more frequently, kiss with more intensity, or sit closer than before. On the surface, it seems like closeness, but the energy underneath is different. It carries urgency, as though she is trying to convince both herself and you that nothing has changed. True intimacy is relaxed, unconscious flowing. Overcompensation has a nervous edge, a rehearsed quality, a sense of performance, and deep down you can feel the difference. Philosophically, this brings us to the paradox of the body. The body is both the site of truth and the site of disguise. She may use her body to conceal, by holding you tighter, by smiling brighter, by performing affection. Yet in doing so, she inadvertently reveals more than she hides. Because the texture of authentic connection is impossible to fake, it lives in the subtle cues, the softness of the eyes, the ease of the shoulders, the spontaneity of touch. When those cues are missing, no amount of performance can replace them. And it's important to acknowledge that these micro shifts are not just about guilt. Sometimes they arise from comparison. When a woman has been physically intimate with another man, her body carries that experience. Even unconsciously, she may be comparing. She may touch you differently, not because she wants to hide, but because the memory of another touch lingers in her nervous system. This comparison creates tension. It interrupts the ease that once characterized your intimacy, replacing it with hesitations, pauses, or unfamiliar gestures. What makes this so challenging to confront is that we live in a culture that often ignores body language in favor of words. We want verbal confirmation, explicit admissions, concrete evidence. But long before words, the body has already spoken. It is in the way she doesn't quite meet your gaze, or the way she suddenly seems restless when you draw close. It is in the shift of her breathing when you lean in, the tension in her jaw, the delay in her touch. These are the places where truth leaks out. And this is why attunement matters. If you are attuned to your partner's body, you will notice when the music changes. You will sense when the dance no longer flows. You will feel when her presence in physical closeness is no longer full, when her body says, I am elsewhere, even as her words say, I am here. That awareness can be painful, but it is also clarifying, because it allows you to see that fidelity is not simply a matter of where the body goes, it is a matter of where the body feels at home. When you lie beside someone, you know whether their body is truly with you. You can feel when the warmth is genuine and when it is borrowed. You can sense when the gestures come from a place of ease and when they are being orchestrated. This knowing does not require evidence. It requires courage to trust what you feel. And so, the body becomes both the betrayer and the messenger. It tells you the truth your partner may not be ready to speak. It reveals through micro shifts what words try to conceal. And in those small deviations, in averted gazes, altered rhythms, hesitations, overcompensations, you find a second sign, because the body always remembers, the body always reveals. And when you pay attention, you realize that her body will show you what her lips may never confess. The body cannot lie, it always speaks the truth, even in silence. If the body gives us the second sign, then language becomes the third. Because as much as we like to think of words as deliberate and controlled, the truth is they too carry a residue of what lives beneath the surface. What someone cannot bring themselves to reveal directly will still find its way into the tone of a conversation, the rhythm of their replies, the quality of their engagement. And when a woman has just slept with someone else, her communication with you doesn't remain untouched. It shifts, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, but always in ways that, if you're paying attention, are hard to ignore. Think about how couples develop their own language over time. It's not just words, it's inside jokes, unfinished sentences that the other completes, phrases that only make sense within your shared history. This private lexicon is one of the most intimate aspects of a relationship. But when another man enters her world, that lexicon begins to fracture. Her communication with you may become less textured, less rich, less invested. She may still speak to you, but the intimacy embedded in language, the warmth, the playfulness, the shared shorthand starts to fade. You feel her words become more transactional, more practical. She answers the question, but without the flourish of affection that once accompanied it. Sometimes it shows up in timing. She replies to messages later than usual. She becomes less available for spontaneous calls or conversations. These delays are not always conscious acts of avoidance. Often, they are the natural consequence of her energy being redirected elsewhere. Her attention is preoccupied. The immediacy that once characterized her communication with you no longer exists, because someone else now occupies part of that immediacy, and you notice it not just in the gaps of time, but in the quality of her engagement when she finally does respond. Other times, it appears in tone. Perhaps her messages feel shorter, more clipped, less warm, or perhaps the opposite, she becomes unusually verbose, filling space with unnecessary details as a way of compensating. But beneath either extreme lies the same truth: the natural rhythm of your communication has been disrupted. The flow that once felt effortless now feels forced, either by scarcity or by excess. And there is another layer, the emergence of new enthusiasm around topics that don't include you. Suddenly, she's animated about ideas, people, or experiences that were never part of her life before. She may not tell you directly about him, but she will indirectly reference his influence through new words, new expressions, new interests. Language, after all, is shaped by the people we spend time with. And when someone new leaves their imprint on her, that imprint eventually seeps into how she speaks, what she shares, and what excites her. Psychologically, this is deeply significant, because communication is more than information exchange. It is a mirror of intimacy. When her communication with you changes, it signals that her relational alignment has shifted. She may still fulfill the formal requirements of dialogue, but the depth is missing. She's talking to you, but she's not confiding in you. She's replying, but not revealing. And it's in that absence of disclosure, that loss of transparency, where the sign becomes unmistakable. What's particularly painful is that language also reveals avoidance. She might sidestep certain questions, offering vague or non-committal answers, or she might grow defensive over simple inquiries, interpreting curiosity as interrogation. That defensiveness is rarely about the question itself. It's about the weight of what she doesn't want to reveal. The avoidance itself becomes the answer. Philosophically, this points us to the role of communication in trust. Trust isn't built on grand declarations. It is built on the consistency of everyday words. The morning check-in, the late night reflection, the random thinking of you message. When those ordinary moments of verbal intimacy disappear, or when they lose their warmth, what's really gone is not just communication, it's reassurance. It's the small signals that say, you are still central in my world. Without them, you begin to feel peripheral, and that feeling is not an illusion. It is a reflection of reality. And again, let's acknowledge the paradox. Sometimes, instead of silence, she may flood you with words. She may text more often, call more frequently, or try to steer conversations in overly affectionate directions. This, too, can be a form of compensation, an attempt to cover the guilt of secrecy by performing closeness. But once again, the texture gives it away. Authentic communication feels effortless, flowing, spontaneous. Overcompensation feels scripted, rehearsed, heavy-handed. It's not what she says, it's how she says it and how it lands with you. Language is also where contradictions slip through. She may claim she's just tired, but her tone is unusually irritable. She may say she's busy, but you notice the pattern of avoidance aligns with specific times. Words may be crafted to reassure, but they often reveal more than they conceal. When there is a secret to guard, language becomes both the shield and the leak. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear the inconsistencies, the sudden shifts, the unexplained defensiveness, the absence of openness that once came naturally. There's also something else worth noticing: silence. Not just delayed replies or fewer messages, but the deeper kind of silence. The absence of curiosity. She stops asking about your day, your feelings, your thoughts. The reciprocity of interest wanes. This silence doesn't come from forgetfulness, it comes from preoccupation. Her curiosity is being spent elsewhere. She is investing her attention into another world, and so the space she once had for you shrinks. Silence, in this sense, is louder than words, and yet we must be careful not to confuse normal fluctuations in communication with betrayal. Life is busy. Stress, fatigue, and distraction can all alter how someone engages. But when the shifts are consistent, when the quality of communication changes, not just occasionally, but as a pattern, that's when it becomes significant. Because in relationships, words are not just carriers of meaning, they are carriers of presence. And when her presence begins to retreat from her communication with you, it is often because her presence has found a new home elsewhere. At the core, this sign is not about the volume of words, but about their depth. You can talk every day and still feel disconnected. If the essence is missing, you can exchange dozens of messages and still sense that her heart is not in them. Because what matters is not whether she speaks to you, but whether she still speaks with you. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. So if you want to know whether something has shifted, don't just look at what she says. Pay attention to how she says it. Notice the rhythm, the tone, the timing, the quality, because words are never just words. They are windows into the inner world. And when those windows begin to close, it tells you she is already opening them somewhere else. What makes the fourth sign so striking is that it is never linear. It is never a clean line of behavior pointing in one direction. Instead, it is a dance between guilt and justification, closeness and distance, silence and over-explanation. Because when someone crosses a boundary they once swore to uphold, their psyche cannot simply return to neutral.